Hello guys, and welcome to Gas City Gaming's set review of Amonkhet. In this video, we'll be looking at all of the colorless cards, so our artifact cards, and our lands for the set. So when we're looking at these cards, keep in mind, we're looking at them in a limited context, so for drafts, for sealed events like your pre-release. That also being said, keep in mind, when I'm reviewing these cards and talking about them, I'm not a Grand Prix top 8 or Pro Tour competitor or anything crazy like that. I'm just a guy who's been involved in the game for a few years now and enjoys talking about the cards and what I think about them. I'd also love to hear what you think about them as well. So if you have any comments, agree or disagree, whatever you want, put it down in the comments below. I'd love to hear back from you. But let's dive right in. Our first card from the colorless / artifacts is Bontu's Monument. It's 3 generic mana for a legendary artifact at uncommon. Keep in mind they're legendary. So even though they are common, you can't like, oh, I'm going to draft multiples and these effects are going to stack and it's going to be so great. They are legendary artifacts. So it's uncommon. Black creature spells you cast costs 1 generic mana less to cast. Whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So another thing to keep in mind, it's when you cast a creature spell, not when a creature enters. This isn't a soul attendant type effect. So if you draft or get Oketra and play Bontu's Monument, putting a token in with Oketra's ability doesn't trigger Bontu's Monument because those weren't cast, they were put in through an activated ability. So this could swing you 3 to 5 life potentially, depending on how long the game goes after you play this. So it could be worth it. I personally might rather play removal if I'm playing like a black-white zombie deck that's a little bit more black-centric. I would play this because it saves you a few mana, and it's going to, of course, swing you a few life as well. And the black-white with, if you get a Grave Crawler, let you cast those. If you get 2 Grave Crawlers, they can let you do that Grave Crawler loop, in which case this can really be turned on that way. So in some of the decks I can see it, but in your, for example, a blue-red, more spells-oriented deck, of course, it doesn't make those cheaper, but even the second effect gets a little worse from that as well. So, again, black-green deck, black-white deck get included in that because you're going to be playing more creatures in those, and especially in that black-white zombie theme deck because there's going to be a lot of recursion in that, bringing your creatures back from the graveyard, playing them over and over again, hopefully. Canyon Sluice. This is our first of the cycle lands. They're all our rare lands for the set are come in tapped, are dual colored, and have cycling for 2. There are some cool effects we can do with these later on in constructed drafting. They're fine. They're going to help fix your colors or draw you a card if your colors are fine, really. So they're all rare. They have both types, so you can fetch these with your fetch lands. It is land, swamp, mountain, so they do have that as well. That's important to note. So your fetch lands for your other formats can find these. So in this case, Canyon Slough, it's red or black, comes in tapped, and it cycles for 2, and it's a rare. These, I think, can see some constructed play. I hope somebody finds some way to really break the fact that it's a fetch land and it can cycle, and I think that has some potential. That's past my theories at 2:30 in the morning when I'm filming this, but I feel like there's something there. Cascading Catacombs is something I want a foil of. If you look behind each of the waterfalls carefully on the art there, you can see statues of the 5 gods as well. It's kind of cool. So it's a rare land. It's indestructible. So I hope there's that for a reason. Is there some land destruction coming on? Like, what's going on there? Like, there's the 1 red card, but is that something we need to look out for, destroying lands later on? So it taps to add a colorless, or you can pay 5, tap it to add 5 mana in any combination of colors to your mana pool. So it costs you 6 to add 5 of whatever you want, right? Or you can just tap to add a colorless mana. So I would play this. It's not strict filtering, but for what it could do, I would play it. Because if you're playing a 3-color deck, you'd be fine, tapping your 3 green and 2 black for 2 black, 2 green, and a white and a red. You'd be fine for doing that as well. So I wouldn't not play it, especially if I get the foil as like my promo at the pre-release, because I have a feeling that's gonna be really pretty. Cradle of the Accursed. So we noticed a card earlier said that you can search for a basic or a desert. This is our first desert land type. It's a common land. It's a desert. Like I said, you can tap it to add colorless to your mana pool, Or you can pay 3, tap, and sacrifice Cradle of the Accursed to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So again, this ability on this doesn't set off Bantu's Monument because you're creating the zombie through an activated ability, not casting the zombie. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. But you know, and if you play it early, it's going to be your land for the turn. You land later, it's going to turn into a creature. So it's kind of that 17th land / 23rd, 24th creature. It can be both. So I would play a Cradle of the Accursed in my black-white zombie deck, or even a black-green deck possibly as well. Edifice of Authority is 3 generic mana for an artifact at uncommon. You can pay 1 and tap it to say target creature can't attack this turn. Oh my goodness, we're having a rough time. Start over again. You can pay 1 generic and tap it to say target creature can't attack this turn, and then put a brick counter on Edifice of Authority. You can also pay 1 generic mana and tap it, and until your next turn, a target creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. Activate this ability only if there are 3 or more brick counters on Edifice of Authority. So, you know, on your opponent's turn, you tap down their thing that you don't want coming at you for a couple of turns in a row. You build up your edifice with 3 brick counters, and then after that you start doing it on your turn because it can't block through your turn and can't attack through their turn, right? So I would gladly play one of these. That tapper effect has been powerful, and then the fact that it powers up into a more powerful tapper, I would definitely play one in really most of my decks. If I don't have really, really good permanent removal, I'd be more than fine playing Edifice of Authority. Embalms Tools. It's 2 generic mana for an uncommon artifact. It says activated abilities of creature cards in your graveyard cost 1 generic mana less to activate. Tap an untapped zombie you control. Target player puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So it can give you that late game inevitability with your zombie deck if the board's just really really covered in creatures, nothing can get through either way. This just gives you, okay, pass turn, okay, pass it back, pause the end step, going to tap all my zombies and mill you for 6. Do it again. That's not going to take very long in a limited environment after 10 turns. That's going to 3 or 4 turns of doing that, your opponent's milled out. Also, all your embalm creatures that we've gone over so far, their cost all gets 1 cheaper. So you can maybe even do that a couple of times in a turn. Create more zombies to mill faster, that kind of thing. So in my, you can have a blue-white embalm deck. White has a lot of the embalm creatures, even maybe a black-white zombie deck with a lot of embalm creatures. I would put it in that as well, because it gives you a couple of win conditions in that it makes your embalm cheaper, so you can have it faster, even multiple times in a turn. Once you hit that curve of being able to cast multiple spells, being able to do multiple things in one turn, that's a big thing in Magic, right, if you're newer to that. It also gives you that alternate win con if you just can't get around, some big stompy creatures with your zombies. Evolving Wilds. I love this art on this Evolving Wilds, just the sheer scale of it. You can look and see all the little tiny trees and the big giant dust storm coming in off the desert, right? So Evolving Wilds, if you're familiar with Magic, you know what it does, but for those of you not, it is a common land that has tap, sacrifice Evolving Wilds, search your library for a basic land card, and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. For newer players, just be very careful. Don't you play this turn 1, or whenever you do play this, on your usually want to do it on the end of your opponent's turn, tap it, get whatever land you want, put it in the tapped so that it untaps during your turn. Don't start the turn with this on the battlefield, because then it's a waste, unfortunately. So just for your newer players, a note if you're watching. The flavor text on this I really like as well. Don't you ever wonder what lies beyond the Hekma, beyond the reach of the gods, beyond the horns on the horizon? Don't you ever wonder? Because if you've read in the lore of Amonkhet, they're all kind of in this protective bubble of the city called the Hekma. It's this kind of force field, and everybody's just in behind that. So people are like, don't you wonder? The rebels kind of are like, don't you wonder what's out there? What's actually out there beyond the Hekma? Don't you want to find out? Fetid Pools is our blue-black cycler. It's our island swamp type, so again, you can fetch for it. And it cycles for 2, enters tapped. Again, you're going to play it in your sealed. If you collect rare lands at all, get your place out of these, and you're going to have a good time. Gate to the Afterlife is 3 generic mana for an uncommon artifact with a lot of text on it. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you gain 1 life. Then you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So you gain a life, and you can loot if you like. You can pay 2 generic mana and tap to sacrifice Gate to the Afterlife, search your graveyard, hand, and or library for a card named God Pharaoh's Gift and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it, activate this ability only if there are 6 or more creature cards in your graveyard. So if you're wondering, if you missed something, if you forgot something, no, there is no card in this set called God Pharaoh's Gift. It's just like how we had in in Aether Revolt, something that looked for a card that didn't exist in Aether Revolt. It looked for a Bolus Planeswalker, right? So we're probably going to get that in Hour of Devastation, just like Gate of the Afterlife probably refers to a card in Hour of Devastation as well. So on its own, I don't necessarily know that that effect is good enough for me to want to pay 3 mana. You know, I'd rather have like a Bontu's Monument or Embalmers Tools than the Gate to the Afterlife, just because I can't activate the second ability, and I don't want to pay 3 mana to get the first ability here. Grasping Dunes is another desert card. There's more than 2. There's another one coming up. Grasping Dunes is a land, desert. It's uncommon. You can tap to add colorless, like the other deserts, or you can pay 1 and tap and sacrifice Grasping Dunes to put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast sorcery. So you can't trick it out in the middle of combat, but you can very easily use it before combat to make combat trickier for your opponent, or you can use it post-combat to finish off a creature that blocked one of yours to kind of kill it and finish it off. Or trigger any -1/-1 counter effects you might have on your side of the board as well. Next we have Hazoret's Monument. So like the other monuments, it is legendary. It costs 3 generic mana for a legendary artifact at uncommon. Red creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And whenever you cast a creature spell, you may discard a card. If you do draw a card, you may rummage. If you're playing a really dedicated red deck, you might want to do this just to get your stuff out earlier, a little cheaper. Thing is, if you play this on turn 3, it makes your 5 drops cheaper. It makes your 5 drops playable on turn 5. And granted, on turn 4, you can maybe play a 3-drop, a couple of 3-drops if your hand is full. Because you can discard it. Like if you draw a couple lands, you can just cast a creature for 1 less, discard a land, draw a card. Hopefully it's something else you can play. And maybe if you have that guy that gives things haste, you can do it. So in the right kind of deck, maybe not sealed deck, but in a draft deck, I can see playing a copy of Hazoret's Monument. Wouldn't want to play multiples. It's not that good. Also, it's legendary, but it's not so good where I would want to always make sure I have this on the board. I would want to be playing my red creatures instead. Horn Khopesh is 1 generic mana for a common artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, and equip is 1. This is like Leonin Scimitar, I think it was called, or Leonin Blade, same thing. It's fine. It's on-board pump. You can just use as many times as you have creatures for. So I might put this main deck, if I'm lacking some non-creature spells, like if I'm playing a green or red deck and I don't really have any pump, might play this and be just fine as well. I wouldn't be too upset about playing a single copy of it. Irrigated Farmland is our blue-white cycle land. It has both plains and island types. It's rare, enters the battlefield tapped, and cycles for 2. Again, you're going to play it, you're going to have fun with it. When I first started playing Magic, I was like, why is this land worth $30? I started playing in the shop, kind of at the tail end of Mirrodin, and kind of when the original Innistrad was out. So I got a couple of shock lands from Turn to Ravnica came out. Like, why is this worth $30? I'm going to trade it in and get awesome creatures. I didn't know things at that time. I will admit that. If you get lands, just keep them. These can see play. We've recently locally started playing a lot of different formats. Like we call it just a grab bag. A couple weeks ago we played Peasant Standard, so commons and uncommons out of standard. Stuff like that. We played just last Tuesday here. We played No Bad Modern, which was tons of fun. I played Miracles. It was tons of fun. Headache to play, stressful but fun to play. So like this kind of thing, just keep it because you never know what kind of Magic you're gonna play, and these cycle lands aren't gonna be worth a super lot, I don't think, unless somebody does end up breaking them, because they're fetchable and cyclable. But just keep your lands. Just trust me, keep your rare lands. Don't do what I did. Don't do what Dave did. Don't examine that sentence. Covenant's Monument is 3 generic mana for legendary artifact at uncommon. Blue creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast a creature spell, target creature an opponent controls doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. This is the card I want to kind of play in my blue decks. Whenever I cast a creature spell, detain something, essentially, if you remember detain, kind of. Tap and keep tapped. That's the kind of thing I want to play. It's going to help me get my big green creatures through. You know, say I have a 7/7, but they have a couple of 4/4s. I can tap one and get through my green creature. By the time it gets back to my turn, they can't attack with that creature of theirs I tapped. You know, because it can't untap. So I get to untap my green creature before they actually get to untap the thing that kept its monument tapped. So it's the kind of thing I want to play in my blue decks. I would definitely include a copy in those. Luxor River Shrine is 3 generic mana for a common artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it. You gain 1 life. Put a brick counter on Luxor River Shrine. You can also tap it. You gain 2 life. Activate this ability only if there are 3 or more brick counters on Luxor River Shrine. In the right kind of Dirtle deck, I like this because it's pay 1, game end of your turn, pay 1, gain 1 life. My turn, pay 1, gain 1 life. My turn, pay 1, gain 1 life. After that, it's just tap, gain 2 every turn for the rest of the game. This format's going to be slower, and I can see this getting there. Hopefully. I kind of want to see somebody draft like 2 or 3 of these and just gain all of the life. But gotta be careful with this. If you do make a deck with multiples in it, you gotta be really careful with how you play them. You don't want to just, play one turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, because that means you haven't played any creatures or blockers or anything since turn 2. So you gotta be careful with how you do that. And just make sure, I can see 2 of in a deck at most, personally. I might want to play around with 1, just to see if I draft a dirtly deck, play with 1 in there, just to see what I can get out of it. Oketra's Monument is 3 generic mana for a legendary artifact that's uncommon. White creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. Again, this is what your white decks want to be doing as well, especially if you have Oketra yourself. You can cast 2 creatures after you cast Oketra, and you can then attack with Oketra because you can throw 3 creatures. This really builds your board out really wide. If you have, a lot of creatures that, the aristocrat type effects, when things enter, when things die, you get things and triggers, and keep track of your maths and your triggers and everything, kids. It can get really fun. But Oketra's Monument in my white decks, I'm definitely including a copy as well. It basically says, I'm getting a discount on my creatures, and I'm getting an extra body on all my creatures. Oracle's Vault is 4 generic mana for an artifact that is rare. It says it has a 2 tap, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card and put a brick counter on Oracle's Vault. It also has 2, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. Activate this ability only if there are 3 or more brick counters on Oracle's Vault. Now keep in mind, we did have that green creature that said for every kind of counter on target permanent, you may add 1. So if you have a couple counters on Oracle's Vault, you can play that creature, add another brick counter on Oracle's Vault, and just tap it to play the top card of your library for free. That seems good. I am playing a copy of Oracle's Vault. If I get it, it's colorless completely, so it slots into any deck, and free spells are good spells. Painted Bluffs. Oh my goodness, I want to. If you're watching this and you get some Amonkhet cards you don't want, like foil Painted Bluffs, you just send them to me. Send me a message on here. I'll give you my address. You can mail me all of your foil Painted Bluffs, and I will just take them off your hands, relieve you of that great burden. Because oh my goodness, they're gonna look so pretty. Painted Bluffs is another of our desert lands. This one's a common. It taps for generic mana or filters. You can pay 1 to tap it to add mana of any color to your mana pool. So you might not play this in a 2-color deck if you're feeling confident in your mana splits. But if you're playing a 3-color deck, you're definitely playing a copy, maybe even 2 of Painted Bluffs, so they can tap for each other, stuff like that. But again, it's just going to look so pretty. This card in foil, I think. And again, just helps your mana fixing in your drafts or in your sealed decks. So it's a good card to play. Pyramid of the Pantheon is also a good card to play. It's 1 generic mana for a rare artifact. It says it has 2 and tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Put a brick counter on Pyramid of the Pantheon. So you might think, oh, but that common land was better. Wait for it. It also has tap, add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. Activate this ability only if there are 3 or more brick counters on Pyramid of the Pantheon. Pretty good ramp. By your turn 4 or 5, you have 3 plus however much land you have, so that can be pretty good. I would play a copy in my deck. It's, if you drop this on turn 8, 9, it's not going to do a whole lot, but if you happen to drop this on turn 1 or 2, you can get it going pretty good, in my opinion. Ronas's Monument. 3 generic mana for a legendary artifact at uncommon. Green creature spells you cast cost 1 generic less to cast. Whenever you cast a creature spell, target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. That's pretty good for your green decks. That's exactly what they want to be doing. Your 2/2 that you cast on turn 2 or 3, you play your 4-drop. Your 2/2 is a 4/4 with trample. Feel free to swing in with that thing. Green, I think this is going to be pretty good for your green-red decks because that effect goes off when you cast a creature spell, not a green creature spell. So that's going to give your red creatures some reach, some trample, and it also pumps their toughness. So I like this in the green-red aggressive decks for Ronas's Monument. Scattered Groves is our rare land for green-white. It's Forest Plains. It enters tapped and cycles for 2. Again, just get these cards. Same thing with Sheltered Thicket. It's rare for a mountain forest, taps for red or a green, enters battlefield tapped, and it cycles for 2. Just get these cards. Do yourself a favor. Don't do what Dave did. Sunscorched Desert is our last desert. We just have a couple more cards, but this is our last desert card. It's a common land desert. When it enters battlefield, deals 1 damage target player. You can tap to add a colorless to your mana pool. Neat thing is this can interrupt the Saheeli combo. So if you want to instantly get a land, you can drop this into play it. It interrupts the Saheeli combo by killing Saheeli when she's down at 1 loyalty. It's kind of a neat little trigger trick there for the Sunscorched Desert. Throne of the God Pharaoh is 2 generic mana for legendary artifact at rare. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. So your Embalms Tools, when you tap to mill and then they lose life equal to that seems good. In the right kind of deck, it can be good. Like if you have some kind of thing where you can just tap your creatures like Embalms Tools in order to do that. So if you're overloaded with creatures a little bit more than your opponent, you can either attack or just choose to tap with Embalms Tools in order to mill, and then they'll lose life equal to those number of creatures. So it's kind of cool. Throne of the God Pharaoh does trigger at the beginning of your end step. So remember that. Not the beginning of your opponent's. So you can't be like, at the end of your turn, I'm going to tap everything and you lose life. No, it triggers at your end step and not your opponent's, because doing that would be a little too good. Last card of Amonkhet is fitting. It's Almond Cats. Sorry, I had to. It's 3 in the morning here. I'm tired. Leave me alone. It's 2 generic mana for uncommon artifact creature. That's a cat. It is a 2/2, and you can exile Watchers of the Dead. Each opponent chooses 2 cards in his or her graveyard and exiles the rest. Giving your opponent choices in Magic is never good. You want the choices, you don't want to give it to your opponent. Because, I'm playing the black-white deck, you want to get rid of all my embalm creatures. You play this, exile it. What am I going to keep in my graveyard? I'm going to keep my embalm creatures in my graveyard. Right? I'm going to get rid of everything else. Getting rid of everything else, maybe I have 5 embalm creatures and you maybe keep 2. Granted, I'm going to keep the best 2, but you're still going to get rid of some. There's not a ton of graveyard hate, so I can see this being a sideboard card against certain strategies. I probably wouldn't main deck it, but I could definitely see being a sideboard card against those black-white or blue-white embalm decks for sure. With that, we are all done. Our Amonkhet set review. Thank you guys so much if you stuck through all the set review videos for us. Thank you so much. If you notice, I'm wearing the same shirt. I've pretty much done this in one sitting. Tons of work going into it. I appreciate you guys so much for sticking around and watching these videos. Love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed them, if you agreed with me, if you disagreed, how these cards performed for you, or your pre-release, or in a draft you did, or anything like that, give us a shout down below in the comments. Follow me at twitch.tv/Dave865, at Dave2619 on Twitter. Follow, share, subscribe, do all the things that help me keep doing this, that motivate me to do this. I want to do this for you guys. The more eyes on Magic, the better, like I said. I hope you guys have tons of fun with your drafts and pre-releases playing with all these Amonkhet cards. I plan to. Have fun, you guys, and have an awesome, awesome rest of your day and pre-release weekend.